thanks for coming back. I love the support. You know, I'm just feeling it right here. And today's book is Long May She Reign by Rhiannon Thomas. This is yet one more book where I could not tell you how I found it. In the end, I did not love it as much as I'd expected. I mean, honestly, I didn't love it, period. But it's not a bad book. It's just a book that I don't think you're gonna put in your top 10 list. I don't think it's necessarily gonna be a book that people are gonna recommend because it lacked a bit of life, of engagement, of passion. What it does have is a really great protagonist who is very science-minded. And maybe that is disconnect because sister was a creative writing major. So anything math and science is not gonna be in my wheelhouse. Let me kind of give you a brief overview of this book, and I do mean brief, okay? What attracted me to this book, and this is gonna say a lot about me, all right? Judge if you feel like it. So the main character, Freya, becomes queen because the king and his entire court dies. She's like 23rd in line, and he's throwing himself this lavish birthday party. She leaves early, and everybody else dies because they eat poison cake. Here's the spoiler. Essentially, the king killed himself and everybody around him. Major spoiler. It was an accident. It was actually another character named Madeline. She had been part of court, and this, it kind of feels almost medieval, and so there's not a lot of scientific breakthroughs at this point in time, and that's one thing that Freya is all about. She's all about science and about making discoveries and expanding her mind, and she doesn't like court. She wants to get away, and of course that is when becoming queen kind of throws a wrench into her plans. She can't just run away and be surrounded by like minds. But anyways, through this process, she meets Madeline, and Madeline is a painter, and she, as I said, had been part of court, but then had gone to the country on the advice of her doctor because she wasn't feeling well. I think the idea is that she suffered from depression. They call it melancholy. Really what it is she's a painter, she licks her paintbrushes, she gets lead poisoning, okay? And so that's what's causing her problems. And eventually she runs across this really pretty gold color, and she's like, I think I'm going to send some to the king. And this is something I don't understand. This pigment is supposed to, in some way, like, act as a medicine. Like, it's supposed to be medicinal, yet it's got a lot of arsenic in it. And so, I guess how it's considered a medicine is because it can flush stuff out of the body. So basically, you just need to take it in small doses. She figures out it's potentially lethal. And because of her time in the country, she realizes just how opulent the king is, how wasteful the king is. And so she's like, if I send him this and I tell him it's a medicine, then maybe he'll basically kill himself. Fast forward to his birthday, and he's like, I'm gonna make my cake out of this. And so he kills the entire court. It's like 400 people, okay? And that's how Freya becomes queen. And so it's a great idea, it really is. Just, I felt like it was dry. And considering how many great aspects there were to this book, it shouldn't have been dry. Like, that's where it stands. I'll give you some of these, all right? So we have The Forgotten, which I've touched on how opulent the king was. So this entire kingdom is focused on wealth. And this is something I don't quite understand about royalty, which is just a personal thing, where the treasury is bankrupt, like the kingdom is wealthy, but the treasury is bankrupt. So anyways, he's spending gobs of money on himself, yet he can't help out the poor. He can't help out the needy. So the Forgotten are essentially their ancestors, and they had founded this realm, and then when they saw that, like, the elite was becoming greedy and selfish, they were like, we're getting out of here, and then, you know, society just continued to spiral. So, like, I thought that was really interesting. But I guess because Freya is so scientifically minded, so right-brained, that she was like, I don't really think I believe in the Forgotten. And so the Forgotten becomes a thread throughout the novel, but because she doesn't believe that they exist, they're really background, and then at the very end, they become foreground. And I was like, I don't know, I guess I love mythology, and so maybe it's just a personal thing, in which I wish we could have delved more into the credibility. Like, were they real? Were they not real? Because I don't really know how many of the Forgotten there are, if it's just like a small sect. But they are worshipped as gods, as deities, and so they're worshipped like gods or deities by some people. I don't really know what the overall idea is. Maybe it's just like with religion in general, where people believe there is a God, but it's not their God. Like, you know, God watches over us, but I don't necessarily believe in God. It could be that kind of thing. If you've ever read Tamara Pierce, I think this is really where it's coming from, where she really touches on some of that mythical stuff, and I think it adds a richness and a flavor to her work that Long May She Reign missed that flavor because Thomas chose not to delve into it. Also, there's the idea of Freya's enemies. As I said, Freya becomes queen because basically of a mass murder. Yes, it was unintentional, but still it ended up being a mass murder. She doesn't know any of this, though. She doesn't know Madeline did it. She doesn't know that Madeline did not intend the king to do this, because what he had done, she only sent him a little bit. And then what he did was, he was like, I'm going to send my people out to find loads more of this pigment. So she did not intend that. She just figured, oh, he'll put it in his wine, he'll put it in his food, this, that, the other, he'll end up killing himself. So yes, Freya is just thinking, look, like, whoever went after the king, maybe he's gonna come after me. Not long after all this happens, and they move to basically this fortified structure, is there another attempt on her life? So now she's like, well, who are my enemies? But let me read you what it says here. Freya is determined to survive, and that means uncovering the murderers herself. Until then, she can't trust anyone. Not her advisors, not the king's dashing and enigmatic illegitimate son, not even her own father, who always wanted the best for her but also wanted more power for himself. As Freya's enemies close in and her loyalties are tested, she must decide if she is ready to rule, and, if so, how far she is willing to go to keep the crown. Sounds really great, right? Like, something's coming at her from all sides. But honestly, that is not how it is. People die, she becomes queen, she has an attack on her life. So the attempt on Freya's life, there's like 5 people of the king's original council left. And they're all like, oh, it's the Gustavites. And they're the ones that killed the king. They're the ones that killed all these people. So now we have to find them and basically kill them because, you know, mass murder. And so then, not long after, when Freya has moved in this fortified fort, a serving girl serves her something. And because she's well versed in poisons, in science things, and smelling, she smells almonds and she realizes there's cyanide in the tarts. And so this serving girl may or may not be a Gustavite. I don't know. I don't really care because I thought it got really convoluted. But so you're thinking, okay, so whoever went after the king is truly after Freya too. We just don't know why. Like, we don't know what the end game is. Like, did they just want to get rid of the elite period and start over? Was it an inside job? And so, like, that is something that is done well. We get a lot of red herrings, a lot of mystery, a lot of suspects, but I came into this book thinking, like, you couldn't trust anybody. You know, there's a new person around every corner that's going to try and take you out. And that was it. Literally. 400 people die. One attack on Freya's life. I guess, technically, so there's this other guy who was the king's best friend, and, you know, he was also, like, his right-hand man, and his name is Torsten Wolf, right? And he's Madeline's cousin. Small detail, it really doesn't matter in the end. But he believes Freya murdered the king. Don't really know why. I guess because she survived, and she's a scientist, and so he goes into her laboratory and he's like, oh, this is all proof that you killed the king, and because she pardoned people instead of off with their heads. Literally, like, this was probably what turned me off, and I was just ready to get the book done, was like the middle of the book. I don't remember what happened in the previous chapter, but honestly, I was like, did I miss something? Like, were there pages torn out? Because it felt like a complete 180. What happens is, I guess you could say there's forward momentum. There's progress with whatever's going on in the storyline. And the next thing you know, Freya is waking up and she can't breathe because Madeline has come to her room, has put her hand over Freya's mouth, and is like, look, my cousin, he's gonna come get you tonight. He has convinced all of these soldiers that you are a murderer, and so now they're gonna come get you. And, like, this is one thing I really don't understand, is how Madeline gets all of this intel. I know they're cousins, and maybe that's how it is. Maybe he's telling her because she's his cousin, but, like, does he not think that she also has ties to Freya or loyalties to Freya? I don't know. I just feel like it's a little too easy. I mean, literally, throughout this entire book, I liked Madeline, okay? I loved how you didn't really know if you could trust her or not, how she seemed like a really good character, and even in the end, she was like, and I have a little problem with this, she's like, I didn't mean to kill them all, but really, was it wrong? Because her whole deal with killing the king was because she wanted a new regime. She wanted a better monarch. Someone who's going to think about the people. But yeah, throughout the entire book, it's like, without her, literally, Freya would have died. Freya would not have made it to the end of the book. She would not have made it to a long reign. And I was just like, a little bit too easy. Anyways, so yes, what happens? Freya wakes up to Madeline having a hand over her mouth, warning her about what Torsten's gonna do. So, this is kind of stupid, okay? So Freya is like, oh, well, I have to go warn my best friend. And this is part of a problem for me. Like, I just can't visualize the layout of what's going on here. Like, I'm thinking she has her chambers. She has a door. Her guards are outside her door. To get to her friend, she has to go outside of her door. I guess not. I guess there's like a whole wing, and then there's big doors, and that's where, I don't know. In any case, she goes to get Naomi, and then, so the three girls are making their escape. How? I don't know. This was all kind of confusing to me too. But then Freya's like, oh, my cat. Guys, I don't want to sound callous, but really, although this, sorry, this plays kind of into a major part of the book, like, her compassion for her cat convinces certain people that she would be a worthwhile queen. Whatever. They escape various means and ways, although I have to say, because she goes back to get her cat, and there are not a lot of guards left after this murder, okay, after this mass murder, but she does have 2 guards, and all of a sudden one of them is just like, it's best if you just give in, if you just come with me and I can take you to Torsten and blah 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 blah. And I was like, wait a minute, I again, like, it was this massive flip, and I was totally thrown. In any case, she ends up being able to get away from him. The three girls escape, and they like double back to the throne room. And so now Freya is sitting in the throne, kind of like, all right, I have to put up some kind of front here to look like I have some semblance of control and elegance and queenliness. Torsten just comes in and he's like, all right, it's time to come with me. Like, it's time to meet your maker. He doesn't come in guns blazing. He like literally walks in kind of maybe a sword raised. And he's like, all right, I'm here. It's time to go because like you don't deserve to be on the throne because I believe you murdered my best friend. It's just all really random. It comes out of nowhere. We do get bits and pieces about Torsten not really liking her, not agreeing with her decisions, but it just out of nowhere, people. And then what Madeline does is Torsten is very superstitious. He believes in the forgotten. And what Madeline had done is she had grabbed a necklace that somehow relates back to the forgotten, and she had put it on Freya, and she uses that to be like, oh, well, like, let me use your superstition and the forgotten against you, and it gives them enough time for Freya's loyal guards to come in. I don't understand this world at all. I guess they are a peaceful nation of sorts, and so all of their weapons are for show. So none of these guys know how to use weapons. None of these guys have sufficient weaponry. Now, the two sides are clashing. Nobody dies. There's not even a fight scene. There's like a struggle scene, I guess, even though these guys have swords. I don't know. It makes no sense to me. What does make sense to me, actually this still doesn't make sense to me, Torsten just walks out of there. Like, nobody stops him, and he has time to get Freya's dad because he wants to hold him as collateral? Like, I just don't understand. And then the rest of the book, essentially, so I guess what you could say, Freya has 3 potential enemies. Whoever killed the king in the court, whoever tried to kill her, and then Torsten Wolf. And so what he does, guys, this is really ridiculous to me. He basically goes around the kingdom. I don't know how long this takes. I think it's like a couple of weeks. Maybe it's like a week. And he just gathers forces. He gathers decrepit weapons. He's like, I'm coming for you. You better be ready. And then that's it. You know, I mean, and then they have the final showdown. And she uses this idea of the forgotten to basically scare the soldiers into submission, to scare Torsten into thinking like he can't defeat her because she has the forgotten on her side because they have chosen her. And that is it. I just thought it was really suspect, really hard to believe that we had no bite back from him until that moment. We had nothing. Like, we literally kind of went from sunshine and roses to an attack in the middle of the night to, like, all of these guards just being on Torsten's side. And there's no explanation for it. Like, it just happens. Where were all of the guards on duty on his side? Like, where were the guards on Freya's side? Like, where were they to stop him? And then he just walks into her, like, waltzes into the room, and is like, all right, you know, it's time for our high noon showdown. Let's get our 6-shooters out. And then he just walks out. And then, I know I keep saying and then, but it just keeps building. He, like, can do this parade around the different territories of this kingdom, building his forces. It was just too easy. Like with Madeline, everything was just too easy. It didn't make sense. There is the romance. The romance, on one hand, I liked the romance. So the romance is Freya, and the king had an illegitimate son named William Fitzroy. Yes, Fitzroy. I keep wanting to call him like William Fitzwilliam. So if I do that, please forgive me. Now, what I don't understand, like I'm going to go on a tiny tangent here, or maybe not so tiny, they tend to expand. But, so, I understand what illegitimacy means, but why is Freya, who is 23rd in line, closer to being heir than a blood relative? Especially because once the king and the whole court dies, the advisors, whoever's left, is like, we need to get you queen now so that Fitzroy can't make his play for the throne. Like, I don't understand this at all. In any case, Fitzroy is kind of a cad. You know, he's someone who just plays the court. And what I really liked about him and the dynamic between him and his father is that his father was apparently a very fickle man. Not surprising with someone who wants to coat his cake in gold. Or who wants, so they bury their dead by sending them along the river on burning boats. And he and his queen go along the river on a bed of jewels. So yes, not hard to believe that he is fickle-minded. But the whole deal is sometimes he likes his son, sometimes he doesn't like his son. And I'm like, you know, it wasn't his choice to be here. Like, you slept with his mother, you got his mother pregnant, you're the reason he is here. What's the problem? Except you made a poor decision. So Freya, like, because she is not a typical courtier, people, like, her whole life just thought she was strange, thought she was weird. And so she disliked them in return. So she doesn't really think much of Fitzroy. And then she meets him, and she gets to know him, and she realizes, like, it's all an act. So they have this burgeoning relationship, and eventually he's like, I like you. And one thing, okay, so this book will be great for any girl, any young girl, who wants to see a protagonist who doesn't live her life for boys, who doesn't live her life for fashion, who is intelligent. And so with that, it's not hard to believe that she has no boy experience, in that because of the treatment she has received from other nobility, other aristocrats. I was going to say Aristocats. Anybody know that movie? Anyways, it's not hard to believe that she would doubt his motivations. And so I do like how she questions him, because she's the queen. Like, what are his ulterior motives? He wasn't exactly nice to her the first time they met, but they have this romance thing, and so I like that it's not a major player, but at the same time, like with most of this book, I thought it was underdeveloped. I think really this book suffered from most was too much. I think Thomas tried to do too much, and it's not a thin book, but she tried to fit so much in here that she couldn't properly develop all of her ideas, and so I kind of wanted more. Like, I didn't get any chemistry between the two. It was like, we get Freya's first impression of Fitzroy, and then after everybody dies, so he doesn't die. Here's a spoiler. He doesn't die because Madeline liked him. You know, not in a romantic way, but she just liked him. She thought he was a cool guy. And so she knew that the one way to save his life, which this kind of is counter to what I said earlier about her not meaning to kill everybody, because if she knew that the king was gonna put gold in the cake, like this pigment in the cake, and the only way to save Fitzroy from it was to get him on the outs with his dad. Like, it doesn't make sense with what she said about, oh, like, I didn't mean for it to happen. Anyways, so he survives because she tells a lie. Like, she says something to the king that makes the king think that Fitzroy is gunning for the throne. So now the king is like, well, I'll show him. I'm not even going to give him some of my gold cake. I'm going to give him, like, a piece of plain sponge cake. So that is how Fitzroy survives. So then, yes, Freya winds up at this fortified fort, and doesn't that sound redundant, a fortified fort? He just says something really mean to her. So we have her first impression, we get basically her first encounter with him, which is not a nice one. And then, so what she does, she has a lab at home. She can't stay at home anymore because of safety reasons. So she has her lab moved to the fort. And again, this is something I don't get. When she realizes, in order to figure out who the murderer is, she needs to do her own experiments, she needs to do her own investigation, therefore she needs her lab, because part of this is figuring out how do you detect arsenic in food. So she asks her guard, one of which betrays her, like, where can I have a lab that nobody's gonna want to go? So they're like, oh yes, a torture chamber. Yet everybody seems to wind up in this torture chamber that is now her lab. I don't get it. Which is going to be the theme, is going to be the catchphrase of this book review, apparently. She can't sleep one night. She shows up in her lab, and there he is. He's already doing whatever he's going to do, and, they start bonding over that. But we get, 3 scenes, I think. So we have the first impression, their first interaction, him first in the lab, I guess maybe second, and then the third time he kisses her, and then she's like, what does it mean? Which I really don't have a problem with. I think it's quite sweet. But then because she has some balls, she's like, what did it mean? Do you just kiss your friends? Do you have an ulterior motive? Were you caught up in the moment? So what she had asked him to do was to bring letters from his father's study, because she just needed to whittle down her suspects. And he had no clue his dad was going to disown him, essentially. But when he finds that letter, he hides it from Freya. She ends up finding it. And, yes, he did lie to her in a certain respect. But she thinks that he knew about this beforehand. And so she's like, he's the guy. So she basically has him under house arrest until she later learns it was Madeline. And then, essentially, we reach the end. She lets him out of his room. His timeout is over. And we have our standoff with Torsten. And there we go. And so I was just like, no chemistry. No real chance for us to get to know them. I liked him. I kind of liked her. I don't think we would have been friends just because creative writing major here, burgeoning physicist over here, not a lot in common. But I just thought, again, one more plot point, one more subplot that fell short, that suffered from development. And then, we have the Gustavites, which kind of goes along with something I've already said, where I liked this idea of them being the enemies. But the girl who had poisoned the tarts, she claims she does it on her own, and there were points where I lost interest. So it could have been explained that she really was a Gustavite, but she takes the entire blame for herself. Yet Freya is like, I need to connect with these people. I need them to know I am not going to be the same kind of monarch that we've had for centuries. I need us to connect. I need them to know I like the ideas that your group was founded on. I think that you've perverted them, but, hello, I'm not a bad person. And so I was just like, one more area where there could have been more tension, there could have been more attacks on her life, they could have been more of a red herring. I mean, honestly, this whole book was about proving that the Gustavites were behind, not by her, obviously, but by everybody else who was convinced the Gustavites were behind the mass murder. Yet, we get very little of them. And what we do get is a really awkward showdown where she goes to their meeting house and they're like, she leaves, And then one of their members comes later and is like, XYZ, here's what I have to say, blah, 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 like, you need to prove yourself to them, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, Another point I thought was really missed was the whole death thing. We see the opulence, we see the death, we get a little bit about the mourning and the tragedy of it all, and then it's essentially over. I really thought it was super interesting. Like, the mystery of it was so intriguing. I really loved when Freya and her crew snuck out of the fort and went to the palace, which, please explain to me how far away these places are. I know they actually, like, Thomas actually does tell us in this book, but my impression is the fort is way out in the countryside, miles and miles away. So how are, like, 4 teenagers traipsing along to the palace in the dead of night and back at the fort before anybody realizes they've been gone? I really enjoyed the scene where they snuck out of the fort, got to the palace, and were like creeping around, trying to find clues, trying to find evidence. You know, they see the banquet hall, the dining hall, where all the people had died, and essentially everything was left untouched except for the fact that the bodies had been removed, some things had been cleaned up, but it was really creepy, it was really atmospheric. I thought, all right, like, we're really gonna get somewhere now. And then we get to the kitchens, and, you know, they find some stuff, and then they're met by looters, and then they run away. Again, I was like, what? So it's just so many times that we just had this really great momentum, only just to stop. And I was like, that's it? And a lot of this book was Freya's misconceptions about what it meant to rule and about pleasing her people, as well as pleasing or listening to her advisors. And actually, I liked that aspect because I think we all have this idea that this is right, this is wrong, this is how things should be done. If I were in charge, things would be so much better. And then you get there and you're like, oh, there's a whole lot more I don't understand. So yes, like, even though it doesn't necessarily make sense to me, like, these people, they're not necessarily trying to be malicious. Like, there's this one incident where I think they were coming back from the funerals. And so they're riding through town, and people are throwing tomatoes at her. And we're all just feeling so bad for Freya because she doesn't deserve to have tomatoes thrown at her. And then somebody in the crowd says something that catches her ear. She's unable to ask about it. So they get back to the fort, and she's like, look, guys, so what is this about a tax to pay for the funerals? And what is this about a curfew? And what is this about people who are going to jail because they can't pay the tax on funerals that have nothing to do with them? And so, on the one hand, you're like, wow, Freya, you are totally right. And then her advisors are like, well, we have to pay for it eventually. Like, you're the one who wanted to do a mass funeral. Somebody has to pay for it. So it's like, they say things where you're like, you know, and then of course then she's like, all of these decisions, like, you can't just do them in my name. You have to talk to me first. And you're like, yes, that's right. Be a queen. And then, you know, they come to her and she's like, maybe I spoke too soon. Like, I really don't know how to rule. I don't know what to tell them. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what the right thing is. And so I liked that juxtaposition. I liked how she didn't have it all going on, and how she had misconceptions that were proven wrong, and it helped her to grow. Although on the other hand, I never quite believed her as an authority figure. I know this is a book. I know that there's a very short time, so I probably would have been complaining if it had gone the other way. But I kind of wanted Freya grab the bull by the horns to be really forceful. You know, I understand her soft heart and not wanting to execute people, but you know what, Freya? Sometimes things need to happen. alright? Like, I thought she went a little too easy in certain situations. I mean, like with Madeline, where she's like, so here's the deal. I'm gonna give you money, I'm gonna give you a map, and I'm gonna give you a chance to get out of Dodge. And if I ever see your face again, I will kill you. And I'm just like, yes, it was unintentional. Yes, she kind of had good intentions because she saw that there was corruption within court and within the elite. And so really what she wanted to do was purge. But she still committed murder. She still, like, even if it had only been the king who died, that was still her intention, was to murder somebody. And I was just like, if there's ever a moment for Freya to step up to the plate and realize that being a queen sometimes means making hard decisions, this was it. When she always was like, no, we've had enough of that. Like, that's not the kind of ruler I want to be. Well, you know what? Sometimes my parents didn't want to spank me and send me to my room, but they did it anyways. Before I sign off, I want to talk about Naomi, because Naomi, want to like her, but I felt like she was a pretty useless character. The deal is, in the beginning, I didn't really know where the relationship with Naomi and Freya was going to go. In the end, what you're supposed to glean is they're extremely close. In the beginning of the book, like, the book opens at the birthday celebration. Freya is at a table full of very vapid, not very nice women, and then Naomi swoops in and kind of saves her from the torture, and these women automatically are like, oh, tell us about your brother. What's going on? Is he attached to anybody? Maybe we can connect him with her, blah, 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 blah. We get this huge build-up over this brother. So then I'm like, maybe he will be Freya's love interest. There's no telling. They sound like opposites, but maybe that is just how it's going to be with this one, is that we're going to root for them to be together. Naomi and Freya leave because Freya has a science experiment. Everybody dies, and now we're like, what's going on with the brother? Like, Naomi is so worried about him, and so we're like, well, obviously he's an important character because we spent the first 5 pages hearing about him. Turns out he's dead. He died. He ate the cake. And then, yes, Naomi goes into mourning. But I just felt like, kind of like with the brother, where we get this massive buildup just for it to go nowhere. We got the same thing with Naomi, where we get this massive buildup as to what kind of friendship they have, only for Naomi to play a very small part in the book. Like, she was so non-essential. I would have preferred, actually, my first thought was that Naomi was the person behind the attack on Freya, like with the cyanide tarts. And so I was like, I wonder why she would hate Freya that much, you know? And so anyways, I think if Madeline and Naomi had been an amalgamation, it would have been a much stronger character. There could have been far more dimension, and Naomi just wouldn't have been the side character that I'm supposed to care about, but I don't. And I just think that's the worst, especially because I think friendships are so important. So we have this best friend who basically does nothing. I was really hoping to love this. My goal lately, because I have like 7 books to read and I have no time to do it. So my goal has been to read 5 chapters at a time. And, you know, there were moments where I was like, meh, meh, meh. But on the whole, you know, I read each chapter. I got through it relatively quickly, a couple days. I won't read it again, but we don't need to go into that again. But yeah, so I hope you have a great day, and I will see you later. Bye!